You're starving, not for food, for something your soul needs and isn't getting. And you've been trying to fill that hunger with everything except what you actually need. You chase money hoping it will make you feel whole. You chase love hoping it will make you feel worthy. You chase meaning hoping it will make you feel alive. You chase freedom hoping it will make you feel real. But the hunger never stops. It just grows. Carl Jung understood that our deepest cravings reveal our unlived lives, our denied needs, our soul's desperate call for what it's dying without. And the hunger you choose today, the one that makes your chest ache with recognition, that's going to reveal what you've been starving for your entire life, what you've been substituting, what you've been denying yourself, and why nothing you've tried has ever been enough. Right now, in this moment, there's an ache inside you. You might not call it hunger. You might call it anxiety or restlessness, or that persistent feeling that something's missing. But Jung would recognize it immediately. It's appetite, not physical appetite. Soul appetite, the deep craving for something essential that you're not getting. And here's what makes this psychological starvation so insidious. You've learned to ignore it. You've learned to distract yourself from it. You've learned to feed it substitutes that temporarily quiet the gnawing, but never actually satisfy. Think about it. How many times have you eaten when you weren't physically hungry? How many times have you scrolled your phone not because you wanted information, but because you needed to fill time, fill emptiness, fill something? How many times have you bought something, worked late, had another drink, started another relationship, not because you genuinely wanted those things, but because you were trying to feed a hunger you couldn't name? That's what Jung meant by unconscious compensation. When we can't have what we actually need, or when we won't let ourselves have it, we substitute. We feed the wrong appetite, and we wonder why we're never satisfied. Carl Jung spent his life studying what drives human behavior beneath the surface of our conscious intentions, and he discovered something profound. Most people are living in a state of chronic soul starvation, not because the nourishment isn't available, but because we don't know what we're actually hungry for. We've been taught to crave the wrong things. We've learned to suppress our real appetites. We've been conditioned to feel guilty about our genuine needs. So we starve ourselves of what we actually require, while gorging on substitutes that never satisfy. Today I'm going to show you 4 hungers, not just wants. Hungers, deep, primal, soul-level cravings that drive human behavior more powerfully than almost anything else. The hunger for love, the desperate need to be seen, known, valued by another human being. The hunger for meaning, the ache to know that your existence matters, that you're here for a reason. The hunger for freedom, the craving to escape every cage, every obligation, every limitation that keeps you from being fully alive. And the hunger for money, the drive to finally feel safe, secure, like you have enough and you are enough. Before you choose, I need you to understand something crucial. Your hunger isn't a weakness. It's not something to be ashamed of or transcended or meditated away. It's information. It's your soul telling you what it needs to thrive. Jung believed that denying our genuine needs creates neurosis, that suppressing our real hungers leads to psychological dysfunction, that trying to be above basic human cravings is what makes us sick. The goal isn't to stop being hungry. The goal is to know what you're actually hungry for, and to feed yourself what you actually need instead of what's just readily available. So I'm going to ask you to be honest in a way you probably haven't been in a long time. I'm going to ask you to feel which hunger creates an immediate response in your body. Which one makes you think, yes, that's it. That's what I've been missing. Which one you've been trying not to feel because feeling it is too painful, too vulnerable, too admitting of need. Because the hunger you've been most afraid to acknowledge is probably the hunger that's been running your entire life from the shadows. Look at these 4 hungers now. Love, meaning, freedom, money, for different appetites. For different forms of soul starvation, for different ways of aching for what you don't have. Which one creates a knot in your stomach? Which one feels like someone just named the unnamed thing that's been eating at you for years? Which one are you starving for? Choose now, because what you're about to discover isn't comfortable, but it's true, and truth, even painful truth, is the beginning of actually getting fed. If you chose love hunger, if the words starving for connection, validation, being seen made something in you contract with recognition, then Carl Jung would tell you that you're living with what he called the unlived relationship. You're surrounded by people but profoundly alone. You're in relationships but not truly connected. You're seen but not known. And that gap between the love you have and the love you need is slowly destroying you from inside out. Let me tell you who you really are. You are someone who has spent your entire life hungry to be truly seen. Not just looked at, seen. To have someone look into your eyes and recognize who you actually are beneath the performance. You're someone who aches to be known. To have someone understand you so completely that you don't have to explain yourself, justify yourself. Translate yourself into something more palatable. You are someone who is desperate, though you'd never use that word. Desperate for validation that you matter, that your existence is valuable, that you're not just taking up space, but actually contributing something meaningful to another human being's life. And here's what makes the love hunger so painful. You probably had love. You've had relationships. You've had people tell you they care. But it hasn't touched the hunger, because what you're starving for isn't just any love. It's a specific kind of love, the kind that sees past your mask, the kind that loves what you've been hiding, the kind that doesn't need you to be anything other than exactly what you are. And you've never had that, or you had it once and lost it, or you've gotten glimpses of it, but never the sustained nourishment you actually need. Jung understood that humans are fundamentally relational beings. We don't just want connection. We require it, not in some abstract, nice-to-have way. In a survival way. We need to be seen by another consciousness to fully experience our own existence. We need to be witnessed to feel real. We need to be valued by someone else to internalize our own value. This isn't weakness. This is how human psychology works. We are mirrors for each other. And when we don't have someone to mirror us accurately and lovingly, we start to disappear. We start to doubt our own reality. We start a hunger for confirmation that we exist and matter. But here's where it gets complicated. Most people with love hunger didn't start out hungry. They started out expecting to be fed. As children, they naturally assumed that their needs for connection, for attention, for validation would be met. And then something happened. Maybe their primary caregivers were emotionally unavailable. Maybe they were seen only when they performed, achieved, behaved perfectly. Maybe they were loved conditionally, loved for what they did, not for who they were. Maybe they experienced rejection, abandonment, or neglect that taught them a devastating lesson. I am not inherently lovable. I have to earn it. I have to be someone other than who I am to deserve it. And from that wound, the hunger was born. The constant, gnawing need to be seen and valued. The desperation, though you hide it well, to have someone finally look at you and say, you, exactly as you are. You're enough. You're wanted. You matter. But here's the cruel irony. Because you're so hungry, you probably choose people who won't feed you. Because that's what you know. That's familiar. You're attracted to emotionally unavailable people because available people feel too easy, too suspicious, too good to be true. Or you push available people away because vulnerability feels dangerous. Because being truly seen feels like exposure. Because if they really knew you, they might confirm your worst fear, that you're not actually lovable. Now, let's talk about the shadow of love hunger, because this is where many people get trapped. The shadow is that you become addicted to the chase. You're not actually trying to be fed. You're trying to stay hungry. Because the hunger, painful as it is, has become your identity. You're the one who isn't quite loved enough. The one who's almost chosen but never fully claimed. The one who's perpetually on the outside looking in. And as much as you hate it, it's familiar. It's safe. Because being truly seen is terrifying. What if they see you and don't like what they see? What if you're finally fully known and it's not enough? Another shadow. You've learned to use your love hunger as manipulation. You become the person who needs constant reassurance, constant validation, constant proof of love. And people in your life can never give you enough because your hunger isn't really about them. It's about the love you didn't get decades ago. You're asking your current partner to fill a void that was created before they even met you. And they can't. They're trying to feed a hunger that isn't actually theirs to fill. And you're resenting them for not being able to do the impossible. There's also the shadow of the perpetual giver. If you can't receive the love you need, you become the one who gives. You love others with the intensity you wish someone would love you. You show up for them the way you wish someone would show up for you. You make them feel seen and valued and important. And you tell yourself this is noble, selfless, loving. But underneath, there's a transaction, an unspoken contract. If I love you this completely, you'll have to love me back, right? Except they don't. They can't, because they don't actually know what you need. You never told them. You never asked. You just kept giving and hoping they'd intuitively know how to give back. And they didn't. And now you're not just hungry. You're resentful. Choosing love hunger reveals something about your current life situation. You're probably in one of three places. First, you might be in a relationship that's not feeding you. You have a partner, but they don't really see you. They love the version of you that you show them, but they don't know the real you because you haven't shown them, because it feels too risky. So you're starving in the presence of plenty, living with someone but feeling utterly alone. And you don't know if the relationship is the problem or if you are. Second, you might be alone and convinced that you always will be. You've tried relationships. They didn't work. And you've decided that the kind of love you need just doesn't exist. That you're asking for too much. That you're too intense, too needy, too broken to be truly loved. So you've stopped trying. You made peace with being hungry. Except you haven't. The hunger is still there. You've just gotten better at ignoring it. Third, you might be in serial relationships, constantly searching for the one who will finally see you. You meet someone, there's a spark, and for a moment you think, this is it, this person gets me, but then they don't. Or they do at first, but then they start seeing the performance instead of the person, and you're disappointed again, hungry again, alone again, and you're starting to wonder if the problem is you. If you're somehow fundamentally unseeable, your path forward, if love hunger is yours, is learning to see yourself first. I know that sounds like a therapist cliche, but Jung meant something specific by this. You can't receive love that contradicts your self-image. If deep down you believe you're not lovable, when someone loves you, you'll either not believe it's real or you'll sabotage it or you'll push them to. Prove it over and over until they're exhausted. The hunger isn't really about them. It's about you not having internalized your own value. You need external validation because you don't have internal validation. So the work is this: learning to see yourself the way you wish someone else would see you. Learning to validate your own existence. Learning to love the parts of yourself you've been hiding, waiting for someone else to love them first. This isn't self-help positivity. This is a psychological necessity. Until you can hold your own value internally, you'll be dependent on others to hold it for you. And that dependency will make you simultaneously desperate and resentful. Desperate for their validation. Resentful that you need it. You also need to learn to ask clearly for what you need. Most people with love hunger are terrible at this. You hint, you hope, you give and hope they'll intuitively know to give back. But they don't know. They're not mind readers. And your inability to ask directly is part of the hunger cycle. Asking feels too vulnerable, too needy, too much. So you don't ask, and then you don't receive. And then you resent them for not giving what you never asked for. That's not fair to them. Or to you. Finally, you need to accept that being truly seen is scary. It's not just what you want. It's also what you fear. Because if someone really sees you, they see everything. The parts you're proud of and the parts you're ashamed of. Your light and your shadow. And that level of vulnerability is terrifying. But it's the only way to actually be fed. You can't be nourished by love that only touches your surface. You need love that goes all the way down. And that requires you to stop performing, stop hiding, stop being a version of yourself that you think is lovable, and risk being a version of yourself that's real. The love hunger carries medicine. Even though it feels like poison, it's teaching you that connection is essential, that being seen matters, that vulnerability is the price of intimacy, that you can't be truly connected while remaining defended. Your hunger isn't wrong, but the way you've been trying to feed it, by being perfect, by being giving, by being whatever they need, that's not working. It's time to feed yourself differently, not by finding the perfect person who will finally see you, but by becoming the kind of person who can be seen, who can tolerate being known, who can ask what they need and receive it when it's offered. That's the work. That's how the hunger transforms from painful craving into healthy appetite. That's how you finally get fed. If you chose meaning hunger, if the phrase starving for purpose, why you exist, made your chest tighten with recognition, then Carl Jung would say you're experiencing what he called the neurosis of meaninglessness. You're alive but not living. You're surviving but not thriving. You're going through the motions of existence without any sense of why. And that absence of meaning, that lack of purpose, is slowly killing something in you. Not your body, your soul. Let me tell you who you really are. You are someone who cannot be satisfied with surface existence. You cannot just work, eat, sleep, reproduce, and die without knowing what it's all for. You are someone who needs your life to matter, not in some grandiose, change the world way, though maybe that too, but in a deep, personal, can look yourself in the mirror and know your existence has significance way. You are someone who is haunted by existential questions. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What makes my life meaningful? And the absence of clear answers to these questions creates an ache that nothing else seems to touch. You probably tried to fill this hunger with achievement. If you just accomplish enough, surely that will feel meaningful, right? So you worked hard. You achieved goals. You impressed people. You climbed ladders. And it felt good for a moment. But then the feeling faded. And the hunger remained. Because achievement isn't meaning. Success isn't purpose. Accomplishment, no matter how impressive, doesn't answer the question. But what's it all for? Or maybe you've tried to fill the meaning hunger with pleasure. If you can't figure out what life is for, at least you can enjoy it, right? So you sought experiences, thrills, joy, fun. And those things felt good in the moment, but they never accumulated into anything that felt lasting. You had the experiences, and then they ended, and you were left with the same emptiness, the same questioning, the same gnawing sense that you're missing the point of everything. Jung believed that the search for meaning is a primary human drive, not pleasure, as Freud thought, not power, as Adler thought. Meaning. And when we can't find it, when we don't know what our existence is for, we develop what he called neurosis of meaninglessness. We become depressed, anxious, addicted, distracted. Not because anything is specifically wrong, but because nothing feels specifically right. Because we're living without the one thing that makes life livable, the sense that it matters. Here's what creates meaning hunger. Usually, it starts with having the wrong purpose assigned to you. Maybe your parents decided what your life should be for. Maybe society told you the meaning of life is success, money, family. Maybe religion gave you a purpose that felt borrowed, not yours. So you try to live that purpose. You try to make it feel meaningful. But it didn't, because it wasn't your meaning. It was someone else's. And living someone else's purpose, no matter how noble or successful, feels hollow. Or maybe you had a purpose, and it ended. Your kids grew up, and you were the parent, and now you're not sure who you are. Your career defined you, and then it ended, and now what? You had a mission, and you accomplished it. And now what? The thing that gave your life meaning is gone, and you haven't found a new meaning to replace it. So you're in this liminal space, this in-between, where you used to know why you existed, and now you don't. And that loss of purpose feels like losing your reason to be alive. The shadow of meaning hunger is that you become addicted to the search itself. You're not actually trying to find meaning. You're trying to stay in the seeking, because settling on a meaning feels too limiting. What if you choose wrong? What if you commit to the wrong purpose? What if you pick a meaning and then discover it wasn't the right one? So you keep searching, keep exploring, keep reading books and taking courses and try new philosophies. But you never land. You never commit. You never actually live a meaningful life because you're too busy looking for the perfect meaning to start living. Another shadow is that you've made meaning an intellectual exercise instead of an embodied experience. You think you can figure out the meaning of life by thinking hard enough, by reading enough philosophy, by analyzing enough. But Jung would say meaning isn't found through thinking. It's found through living, through making choices, through committing to something even without certainty, through creating meaning rather than discovering it. You're waiting for meaning to reveal itself to you, but it's waiting for you to create it. There's also the shadow of using meaning as an escape from responsibility. As long as you're searching for your purpose, you don't have to actually do anything. As long as you don't know what you're here for, you have an excuse for not fully engaging with life. You can float through non-committal, because how can you commit when you don't know what you're for? But that's just fear dressed up as philosophical seeking. You're not seeking meaning. You're avoiding the terror of choosing a meaning and being wrong. Choosing meaning hunger reveals where you are right now. You're probably going through the motions of a life that looks fine from the outside. You have work, relationships, responsibilities. But inside, it all feels empty. You're functioning, but you're not flourishing. You do what you're supposed to do, but you don't know why you're doing it. There's no animating purpose, no driving mission, no sense of this is what I'm here for. Just existing. And existing without purpose feels like dying very slowly. Or maybe you're in a crisis. Something happened, a loss, a disappointment, a realization, that destroyed whatever meaning you thought your life had. And now you're in free fall, not knowing who you are, not knowing what you're for, not knowing what to do with the time you have left. And that not knowing is more terrifying than any specific bad thing, because it calls into question whether your existence has any point at all. Or maybe you're young enough that you haven't yet built a life, and you're paralyzed by the meaning question. What should I do? What career? What path? What purpose? And the options are overwhelming, and the stakes feel too high, because if you choose wrong, you might waste your entire life. So you're frozen, unable to commit to anything, because you can't figure out what your life should be about. And time is passing, and the hunger is growing. Your path forward, if meaning hunger is yours, is understanding what Jung meant when he said, meaning is not something you find, it's something you create. You're waiting for a revelation, a sign, a divine voice that tells you what you're here for. But that's not how it works. Meaning doesn't descend from above. It emerges from within through the act of living committed to something. Here's the secret. Meaning comes from engagement, not from understanding. You don't figure out what life means and then live it. You live it fully and committedly, and meaning emerges from that living. Every great purpose was created by someone who didn't know if it was the right purpose, but committed to it anyway. Every meaningful life was built by someone who chose a direction without certainty and walked it until it became meaningful. So your work is this. Stop searching and start living. Pick something, not the perfect thing, not the guaranteed to be meaningful thing. Just something that calls to you even slightly, and commit to it, not forever, but for now. Give yourself fully to it and see if meaning emerges, because meaning is a byproduct of engagement, not a prerequisite for it. You create meaning by caring about something enough to dedicate yourself to it. The meaning comes after the commitment, not before. You also need to accept that meaning is personal, not universal. You're looking for the meaning of life, but there isn't one. There's only the meaning of your life, and only you can determine that, not by thinking about it, by living into it, by noticing what makes you feel alive, what you lose yourself in, what you do even if no one was watching, what you care about so much that you'd sacrifice comfort for it. That's your meaning. It won't look like anyone else's, and it shouldn't. Finally, you need to understand that meaning doesn't require greatness. You don't need to change the world. You don't need to cure cancer or write the great novel or start a movement. Your meaning might be raising children with love, creating beauty in small ways, being kind to people who need kindness, living with integrity. Those are meanings, and they're enough. The meaning hunger has convinced you that your life needs to be extraordinary to matter. But ordinariness lived with purpose is meaning. Being human with consciousness and care is meaning. You don't need to be more than you are. You need to be what you are with intention. That's meaning enough. The meaning hunger is teaching you that existence without purpose is suffering. That humans need a reason to get up in the morning. That life without meaning is just waiting to die. But it's also teaching you that meaning isn't found. It's made. You create it through commitment, through engagement, through caring about something enough to organize your life around it. Stop searching for permission to live meaningfully. Start living meaningfully, and the permission will come. The hunger won't disappear, but it'll transform from desperate seeking into engaged creating. And that's how you finally get fed. If you chose freedom hunger, if the words starving for liberation, escape, wildness made something wild in you howl with recognition, then Carl Jung would say you're living in what he called the cage of the persona. You're trapped, not physically, psychologically. You've built a life that looks good, but feels like prison. And the hunger for freedom, the desperate need to escape, to run, to break every constraint, that's not irresponsibility. That's your authentic self screaming to be liberated. Let me tell you who you really are. You are someone whose soul is dying captivity. You are living a life that doesn't fit you. You've become someone you're not. You've accepted constraints that your true nature cannot tolerate. And every day you stay in this cage, some essential part of you withers. You are not ungrateful. You are not immature. You are not commitment phobic. You are someone whose soul requires freedom the way lungs require air, and you're suffocating. You probably can't explain this to people. When you try to tell them you feel trapped, they look at your life and see nothing wrong. Good job. Nice home. Stable relationship. Responsibilities handled. What are you complaining about? But they don't understand. The cage isn't visible. It's made of expectations, obligations, routines, roles, and all the tiny compromises you've made to be acceptable, to be responsible, to be what they need you to be. And each compromise is a bar in your cage. And now the cage is so complete, you can barely remember what freedom felt like. Jung believed that modern civilization creates a fundamental conflict in the human psyche. We need society, structure, stability, but we also need wildness, spontaneity, autonomy. And most people give up the wild in order to have the stable. They domesticate themselves. They trade freedom for security. They cage themselves voluntarily because the cage comes with comfort, approval, belonging. And for most people, that trade is worth it. But for you, you thought it would be worth it. You thought you could live in a cage if the cage was nice enough. But you can't. Your soul requires freedom more than it requires comfort. And you didn't know that until you gave freedom up. Here's what creates freedom hunger. Usually it starts with giving yourself away piece by piece. First, you adapted to make your parents happy. Then you conformed to fit in with your peers. Then you performed to succeed at work. Then you compromised to keep your relationship stable. Then you sacrificed to be a responsible parent. And each adaptation, each conformity, each performance made sense at the time. But collectively, they added up to a life where none of you remains, where you're playing a role so convincingly that you've forgotten there's a person underneath, where you've traded your wildness for wellness, your authenticity for approval, your freedom for the illusion of control. Or maybe you made one big choice that defined everything after. You took the safe job. You married the stable person. You stayed in your hometown. And at the time, it felt like the responsible choice, the adult choice. But now, years later, you realize that choice closed all the other doors. And the person you are now, living this safe life, isn't the person you were supposed to be. You can feel the unlived versions of yourself haunting you. The writer you could have been, the traveler, the rebel, the wild one. They're all trapped with you in this cage. And they're all starving. The shadow of freedom hunger is that you've romanticized freedom without understanding what it actually requires. You dream about escape, about running away, about leaving everything behind and starting fresh. But you haven't thought about what happens after the escape, where you go, how you'd survive, what you'd do with freedom once you had it. You're in love with the idea of breaking free, but you haven't asked yourself, free to do what? You're running from the cage. But you're not running toward anything. That's not freedom. That's just fleeing. Another shadow is using freedom as an excuse to avoid depth. You tell yourself you can't commit to people, places, careers because you need to stay free. But really you're afraid. Afraid that committing to anything means being trapped. Afraid that staying anywhere means missing out. Afraid that choosing one path means all the other paths die. So you stay uncommitted, perpetually mobile, always keeping your options open. But that's not freedom. That's just fear being pinned down. And it's lonely. and it's preventing you from building anything meaningful. There's also the shadow of confusing freedom with lack of responsibility. You think being free means having no obligations, no commitments, no one depending on you. But that's not freedom. That's just isolation. Real freedom is having agency, having choices, having the power to shape your life according to your values. You can be deeply committed and still be free if those commitments are yours, if you chose them, if they align with who you actually are. The cage isn't commitment. The cage is commitment to things that aren't yours, to roles that don't fit, to expectations that aren't aligned with your truth. Choosing freedom hunger reveals something about your current situation. You're probably living a life that looks successful but feels like suffocation. You're doing everything right, being responsible, showing up for obligations. But every day feels like wearing clothes that don't fit, like speaking a language that's not yours, like pretending to be someone you're not. And the pretending is exhausting, and you're starting to break, starting to fantasize about escape in ways that scare you, because the fantasies are getting more serious, more detailed, more real. Or maybe you've tried to escape before and it didn't work. You quit the job, but you needed income, so you took another one just like it. You left a relationship, but you chose the same kind of person in a different body. You moved cities, but you brought yourself with you and the cage came along. Because you didn't escape. You just changed cages. And now you're realizing that the cage isn't external. It's internal. It's how you think about freedom, responsibility, what it means to be an adult. And you can't run away from that. Or maybe you're paralyzed by the fear that if you pursue freedom, you'll lose everything. Your security, your relationships, your identity. And you're caught between two terrors. The terror of staying and slowly dying in the cage, or the terror of leaving and losing everything you built. So you're frozen, neither free nor fully committed to the cage, just stuck in agonizing indecision. And both options feel like death. Staying feels like slow death. Leaving feels like annihilation. And you don't know which death to choose. Your path forward, if freedom hunger is yours, is learning to distinguish between the cage and your life. Not everything that feels constraining is actually imprisoning you. Some structure is supportive, not suppressive. Some commitment is expansive, not limiting. Some responsibility is empowering, not enslaving. Your work is figuring out which constraints are killing you and which ones are holding you, which responsibilities are authentic expressions of your values, and which ones are obligations you took on to please others, which commitments are expanding who you are, and which ones are shrinking you. Start with this question. If I were completely free tomorrow, what would I do? Not where would I go? What would I do? How would I spend my time? What would I create? What would I care about? Because if your fantasy of freedom is just away from here, then you're not actually seeking freedom. You're seeking escape from pain. And escape isn't the same as liberation. Liberation is freedom toward something. Escape is freedom from something. One is creative. One is just reactive. Next, you need to identify which bars in your cage are real and which ones are imagined. Some constraints are actual. Your body needs food, which requires income, which requires some kind of work. But other constraints are just beliefs. I have to stay in this career. Do you? Or is that just what you've told yourself? I can't leave this relationship. Can't or won't. I can't start over at my age. Says who? Many of your bars aren't made of steel. They're made of fear, of stories, of limiting beliefs about what's possible. And those bars can be removed. Not easily, but they can. You also need to learn that real freedom requires courage, not just desire. You want to be free, but are you willing to be uncomfortable? To be uncertain? To be judged by people who think you're making a mistake? To potentially fail? Because freedom isn't comfortable. The cage is comfortable. That's why it's a cage. Freedom is uncertain, scary, and it requires you to take responsibility for your choices instead of blaming the cage for your unhappiness. Are you ready for that? Or do you just want the fantasy of freedom without the reality of it? Finally, you need to accept that you might not need complete freedom. You might just need more freedom than you have now. You don't have to burn your life down. You don't have to leave everything. You might just need to renegotiate your constraints, to remove the bars that are most suffocating, to reclaim agency in specific areas, to say no to some obligations so you can say yes to some wildness. Freedom isn't all or nothing. It's a spectrum, and even a little more freedom might be enough to let you breathe. The freedom hunger is teaching you that living inauthentically is a form of death, that giving yourself away piece by piece until nothing remains is not noble, it's tragic, that your soul requires sovereignty, requires agency, requires the power to shape your life according to your truth. But it's also teaching you that freedom without purpose is just another cage, that you can be wild and still committed, that you can be free and still connected, that real freedom isn't the absence of constraint, it's the presence of choice. And you have more choice than you've been allowing yourself to see. The hunger is calling you to reclaim it, to stop being a prisoner of your own compromises, to break the bars made of fear and stand in your own power. That's liberation, not running away, but running toward your own truth. That's how the freedom hunger transforms from desperate need to empowered action. That's how you finally get free. If you chose money hunger, if the words starving for survival, security, enough made your stomach drop with anxiety, then Carl Jung would recognize in you what he called the complex of insufficiency. You're not greedy. You're not materialistic. You're terrified. Terrified that you don't have enough, that you won't have enough, that you'll never have enough. And that terror, that bone-deep fear of scarcity, is running your entire life from the shadows, controlling your choices, driving your decisions, keeping you locked in survival mode, even when survival isn't actually at stake. Let me tell you who you really are. You are someone who has never felt safe, not truly safe, not, I can relax and trust that everything will be okay, safe. You are someone who wakes up with anxiety about money even when you have money, someone who checks their bank account compulsively, someone who calculates, plans, worries, prepares for worst-case scenarios. Someone who can't enjoy what they have because they're too busy stressing about losing it or not having more. And people who haven't experienced this kind of scarcity terror don't understand. They say, you're fine, you have enough, stop worrying. But you can't stop, because the hunger isn't about actual numbers. It's about feeling safe. And you've never felt safe. Not once. You probably can't trace this hunger to one moment. It's been with you forever. Maybe you grew up poor and the fear of poverty is imprinted in your nervous system. Maybe you watch your parents stress about money and absorb their anxiety. Maybe you experience financial catastrophe, losing a home, bankruptcy, destitution, and you're determined to never be that vulnerable again. Maybe you never had enough, and now you're compulsively accumulating, convinced that more will finally make you feel secure. Or maybe you have enough by any objective measure, but it never feels like enough because enough isn't a number. Enough is a feeling, and you've never felt it. Jung understood that money is never just money. It's symbolic. It represents security, power, freedom, value, worth. And when we're hungry for money, we're usually hungry for what money represents. Security, the feeling of being protected from catastrophe. Power, the ability to control your circumstances. Freedom, the liberation from worry. Value, proof that you matter, that you're successful, that you're enough. And when we didn't get those needs met psychologically, we try to meet them materially. We chase money hoping it will finally make us feel secure, powerful, free, valuable. But it doesn't, because the hunger is psychological, not financial. Here's what creates money hunger. Usually it starts with actual scarcity, with not having enough, with experiencing or witnessing the terror of poverty, with learning that money equals survival, and without it you're vulnerable, exposed, at risk. So your nervous system organized around this truth. I must have money or I will not be okay. And that became your primary motivation, not passion, not purpose, not connection, survival. And even when you got out of actual scarcity, the psychological scarcity remained. Your body still believes you're in danger. Your nervous system still screams, not enough, not safe, need more. Even when the numbers say otherwise. Or maybe your money hunger isn't about survival. Maybe it's about worth. Maybe you learned that your value is tied to your success, that you're only as good as your income, your net worth, your financial achievement. Maybe your parents' approval was conditional on your success. Maybe society taught you that money equals value. Maybe you internalized capitalism so completely that you confuse your bank account with your worth as a human being. So you chase money to prove you're enough, to earn validation, to silence the voice that says you're not valuable unless you're wealthy. But no amount of money silences that voice, because that voice isn't about money. It's about unworthiness. And unworthiness can't be cured with deposits. The shadow of money hunger is that you become what you feared. You've organized your entire life around financial security in ways that have cost you everything else. You've sacrificed relationships for a career. You've traded time for money. You've given up joy, freedom, authenticity, purpose, all of it, in pursuit of enough. And you got the money, maybe not as much as you wanted, but more than you need. And you're still not satisfied, still not secure, still hungry, because you traded your life for money, and now you have money but not a life. And that realization is devastating. Another shadow is that you've made money your god, the thing you worship, the thing you organize around, the thing you sacrifice for, the thing you believe will save you. And like all false gods, it demands everything and delivers nothing. You've given it your time, your energy, your relationships, your health, your soul. And in return, it's given you numbers on a screen. Numbers that should make you feel secure, but don't. Numbers that should make you feel successful, but don't. Numbers that were supposed to be the answer, but turned out to be just another question. Now what? I have the money. Why don't I feel different? There's also the shadow of using money as a substitute for the other hungers. You tell yourself you're working hard for financial security, but really, you're using work to avoid your marriage. You're using pursuit of money to escape the meaning question. You're using financial goals to distract yourself from the emotional starvation. Money hunger can be a cover for all the other hungers, because chasing money is socially acceptable. Working hard is applauded. But chasing love, meaning freedom, those make you vulnerable. Those require you to admit need. So you chase money instead. And you wonder why success feels so empty. Choosing money hunger reveals where you are. You're probably in one of two places. Either you don't have enough money and the hunger is about actual survival, actual anxiety about how you'll pay rent, feed yourself, handle emergencies. And if that's you, this hunger is rational. It's not psychological pathology. It's real need. And you need practical help, not just mindset shifts. But even if that's true, notice this. The way you relate to scarcity, the stories you tell about it, the amount of mental energy you give to it, that's something you can work with even while working on a practical problem. Or you do have enough money. By any objective measure, you're financially secure. But you don't feel secure. You still worry, still stress, still calculate and plan for catastrophe. And people around you don't understand why you can't just relax, why you can't enjoy what you have, why you're still so focused on accumulating when you clearly have enough. And you can't explain it, because the hunger isn't logical. It's not about the actual numbers. It's about a feeling of safety that no amount of money has been able to create. And you're starting to realize that maybe money can't create it, that maybe you're chasing the wrong thing. Your path forward, if money hunger is yours, depends on whether your hunger is about actual scarcity or psychological scarcity. If it's actual scarcity, if you genuinely don't have enough to meet basic needs, then your work is practical. Find ways to increase income, decrease expenses, create stability, but do it consciously. Don't let survival mode become your permanent state. Don't let the stress of not having enough prevent you from seeing opportunities when they appear. Scarcity mindset can keep you trapped in scarcity even when opportunities for abundance arise. But if your hunger is psychological, if you have enough but it never feels like enough, then your work is different. You need to understand that you're not actually hungry for money. You're hungry for the feeling you think money will give you. Security, safety, worth, peace. And here's the hard truth. Money can't give you those things. Not directly, because those are internal states. They're about how you relate to yourself and your circumstances, not about what you have. You can have millions and feel insecure if your sense of security is dependent on never losing anything. You can have nothing and feel secure if your security comes from internal resilience rather than external protection. Your work is learning to feel secure without money being the source of that security. And that's terrifying because money is tangible. You can count it. You can see it. You can control it mostly. But internal security? That requires trust. Trust that you'll be okay even if circumstances change. Trust that you're resourceful enough to handle challenges. Trust that your worth isn't determined by your net worth. And trust is what the money hunger has destroyed. You don't trust. You can't trust. Because trusting means relaxing. And relaxing means being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is when bad things happen. So the practice is this. Start small. Find moments where you practice feeling secure without checking your bank account, without calculating, without planning. Just sit with the discomfort of not knowing exactly where you stand financially. And notice that you're still okay. You're still alive. The catastrophe you fear isn't happening in this moment. Do that for 5 minutes, then 10, then an hour. Slowly, carefully. Teach your nervous system that security doesn't come from constant vigilance. It comes from internal resilience. You also need to examine what money represents to you. Is it security? Then work on feeling secure through other means: community, skills, relationships, internal resources. Is it freedom? Then recognize that money can buy freedom from some things, but not freedom to be yourself. That's free. Is it worth? Then do the painful work of separating your value as a human from your financial success. You were valuable before you had money. You'll be valuable if you lose money. Your worth is inherent, not earned. Finally, consider this. The money hunger is teaching you that you can't buy safety, that accumulation doesn't equal security, that no amount of external protection makes you invulnerable to loss, to change, to uncertainty. The only real security is internal. It's knowing that whatever happens, you'll handle it, not because you have enough money, but because you're enough, without the money, without the success, without any of it. You, just you, enough. That's the lesson. And it's the hardest lesson because it requires you to stop running, stop accumulating, stop trying to buy your way to safety, and instead become the safety you seek. That's how the money hunger transforms. From desperate accumulation to conscious stewardship, from scarcity terror to abundance trust, from needing more to knowing you're enough. That's how you finally feel fed. Now you've chosen your hunger. You've seen what it reveals about your soul's deepest craving, your unfulfilled need, your chronic starvation. But Carl Jung wants you to understand something essential. You're not just one hunger. You contain all four. The hunger for love, for meaning, for freedom, for money. They all live in you. What you chose today simply shows which hunger is loudest right now, which appetite has been most denied, which need is most urgent. But you need all four. And denying any of them creates imbalance, creates neurosis, creates suffering. Jung's work was always about wholeness, about integration, about bringing all parts of yourself into conscious relationship. The person who is love but no meaning feels empty despite connection. The person who has meaning but no love feels isolated despite purpose. The person who has freedom but no security lives in constant anxiety. The person who has money but no freedom lives in a gilded cage. You need balance. You need all four hungers to be acknowledged, honored, fed in healthy ways. The love hunger teaches you that connection is essential, that being seen matters, that vulnerability is the price of intimacy. But it also warns you not to make others responsible for your sense of worth, not to use love as a substitute for self-knowledge, not to starve yourself trying to feed others. The meaning hunger teaches you that purpose is what makes life livable, that existing without knowing why creates despair, that you need a reason to get up in the morning. But it also warns you not to make meaning an intellectual exercise, not to use the search as an excuse for not living, not to wait for a perfect clarity before committing to anything. The freedom hunger teaches you that autonomy is sacred, that living inauthentically is a form of death, that your soul requires sovereignty. But it also warns you not to confuse freedom with isolation, not to use liberty as an excuse to avoid depth, not to run from commitment in the name of staying free. The money hunger teaches you that security matters, that survival needs are real, that financial stability creates options. But it also warns you not to confuse money with safety, not to use accumulation as a substitute for self-worth, not to sacrifice everything else in pursuit of enough. You need all four: love and meaning and freedom and money, connection and purpose and autonomy and security. Not in perfect balance all the time, but in conscious relationship, knowing which hunger is calling, knowing how to feed it, knowing when you're substituting one hunger for another. That's psychological maturity. That's what Jung meant by individuation, not being free from hunger, but knowing what you're hungry for, and feeding yourself what you actually need. So reflect now. Which hunger chose you, and why? What has been denied? What have you been avoiding? What need have you been trying to fill with the wrong food? And what would it look like to actually feed that hunger? To give yourself what you're truly starving for instead of what's just readily available? Comment below which hunger is yours. Tell me what you recognize. Tell me what you've been substituting. Tell me how you're going to start feeding yourself what you actually need. Because that's how we heal. Not by transcending hunger, but by understanding it, by honoring it, by feeding ourselves consciously instead of stuffing ourselves unconsciously with things that never satisfy. If this spoke to something deep in you, if you felt your hunger named, if you recognize the starvation you've been living with, then support this work. Leave a like. Subscribe for more depth psychology that actually helps you understand yourself. Share this with someone who's hungry too. Someone who's been eating everything except what they need. Someone who needs permission to name their appetite. And finally get fed. Thank you for being brave enough to look at your hunger. Thank you for being honest enough to admit you're starving. Thank you for being willing to do the work of actually feeding yourself instead of numbing yourself. The hunger is real. The need is valid. And you deserve to be nourished, not with substitutes, but with what your soul is actually calling for. That's the journey. That's the work. That's what it means to live consciously instead of just surviving hungrily. Your hunger knows what you need. Will you finally listen? Will you finally feed yourself? That's the question. And only you can answer it.